Hello, my friends. Welcome back. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
I had never really been alone in my house before. My parents usually hovered around, reminding me to lock doors, turn off lights, or check the windows. But that weekend, they were gone. Gone for 2 whole days to a conference in another state. 16 years old and finally home alone. I thought it would be fun, a quiet break from rules, homework, and the constant background of my parents' lives. The first night was perfect. I ordered pizza, dug into the couch with a blanket, and scrolled through my phone. Outside, the street was quiet, peaceful. Too quiet. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just a neighborhood. The kind of quiet that made me aware of every creak and groan in the house. But I was used to that. Then I smelled it. Something faint, acrid, almost burnt. I sniffed the air. Nothing. The oven hadn't been on for hours. The lights were off in the kitchen. No smoke, no fire. I shrugged. Probably the heater or something left on earlier. Then I heard the first knock. Soft, polite, almost hesitant, from a back door. My stomach sank. The doors were locked. My parents had made sure of it before they left. I peeked through the window. The backyard was empty, still, moonlight glinting off the swing set. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. I told myself it was a branch or the wind, maybe even an animal. But the knock came again. Louder, slower, more deliberate. Hello, I called, my voice shaking more than I wanted. Silence. I grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door. My pulse pounded in my ears. The knocking stopped. Then the footsteps began. Slow, heavy, deliberate, coming from the hallway that led to my bedroom. I pressed myself against the wall, trying not to make a sound. My phone was dead. No signal. The house phone didn't work either. I was completely alone and somehow completely trapped. The steps stopped outside my bedroom. Then I heard the whisper. You shouldn't be alone. It was calm, almost soothing, and yet it froze me where I stood. My stomach turned to ice. I ran to the kitchen, thinking I could barricade myself, but the hallway seemed longer than usual. Corners I knew well twisted in strange ways. Doors I remembered were gone. I realized the house was different, reshaped, somehow alive. I ran upstairs. Maybe the attic. Maybe if I got somewhere high, small, I could hide. The stairs groaned under me, but it wasn't with settling. It was alive, shifting, echoing with each of my steps. The attic door opened into the familiar cramped space filled with boxes and old furniture. I crouched behind a pile of stacked chairs and tried to calm my racing heart. Silence fell. For a few moments, I thought I might be safe. Then I saw it, my reflection, in a small, cracked mirror tucked in the corner. It wasn't me. Not really. The eyes were darker, unnaturally deep. The mouth curved into a smile I had never made. The skin was pale, almost translucent, wrong. I stumbled backward, tripping over a box. When I looked again, the mirror was empty. The attic had grown larger. Shadows flickered in impossible ways, twisting and bending, whispering my name over and over. Then a voice spoke behind me. My voice. You belong here now. I turned. My double was standing there. Same hair, same clothes, same height. Calm, patient, smiling. I ran, but the space shifted beneath me. Every step I took brought me closer to it. My hands reached for it, but passed through like smoke. Then it touched me. Cold. Impossible cold. My vision went black. When I opened my eyes, I was on the couch. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The house looked normal. My parents were still out of town. My phone worked. Relief washed over me. Maybe it had been a dream. I went to the mirror in the hallway. My reflection smiled. Not me, my double, waiting. I ran outside, down the street, past my neighbors' houses, past the familiar streetlights, until I reached a friend's house. I told them everything. They didn't believe me. The police found nothing. No forced entry. No shadows. No whispers. Just me, alone, carrying a terror that didn't make sense. I returned home that evening. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I stared at the hallway mirror, and then I saw it. My reflection walking out of the mirror toward me. Only this time, I didn't run. It reached out and stepped forward. I realized then, too late, that the house didn't want me to escape. It had claimed me. My reflection had taken my place in the real world. And now, I was trapped inside the mirrors, alone, watching everything from the other side, forced to witness the house learning its next victim. Every mirror I pass now shows me the same thing. My own face smiling at the world while I stare back, silent, trapped, waiting. People think Alaska kills you fast. Freezing, bears, avalanches. That's comforting, actually, because it means you believe death here is loud and obvious. Mine almost wasn't. I came north to help search for a missing bush pilot named Evan Holt. His plane vanished somewhere between Bethel and a fuel stop that barely deserved a name. No distress call, no debris, just gone. I was part of a volunteer ground team. Locals, state troopers, a few of us from the lower 48 who thought we were prepared. Evan's disappearance wasn't unusual on paper. Weather changes, instrument failure, whiteout. Alaska swallows planes the way the ocean swallows boats. But the trooper leading the briefing didn't call it an accident. He said something went wrong. The search zone cut across tundra, frozen riverbeds, and black spruce forests so dense it swallowed sound. We were split into teams of 3. I was paired with a local tracker named Wes and a quiet woman from Nome named Marcy. Wes had lived up here his whole life. He listened more than he talked, and when he did talk, it was never wasted. On the second day, we found Evan's plane. It was upright, not crashed, not burned, sitting on a frozen lake like it had landed cleanly and shut down. That scared me more than wreckage ever could. The doors were open, no footprints leading away, no blood, no supplies missing. The emergency radio was still mounted and untouched. It looked like Evan had simply stepped out and disappeared. Wes walked around the plane slowly, crouching near the wing. He didn't leave, he said. Marcy asked how he knew. He didn't take his shadow with him. I thought it was a joke until I looked closer. The low winter sun cast long, sharp shadows across the ice. The plane's shadow stretched correctly. Ours did too. But near the open door, there was a shadow shaped like a man, standing alone, unconnected to anything. No body to cast it, just a dark silhouette frozen on the ice. I felt cold crawl into places my clothes couldn't protect. We reported it. The troopers dismissed it as a trick of light. They always do. That night, we camped a half-mile from the lake. The cold sank deep, the kind that makes your bones ache from the inside. Around midnight, I woke up because I felt crowded. I opened my eyes. Someone was standing just outside the tent, blocking the moonlight. "Wes," I whispered. No answer. The shape didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just stood there, slightly too tall, shoulders bent forward like it was peering in. I reached for my flashlight. The moment the beam snapped on, the shape vanished, but my shadow didn't match my movement. It leaned the wrong way, stretching toward where the shape had been, like it wanted to follow. I yanked my hand back, heart hammering. From the other tent, Marcy screamed. We found her outside, shaking, pointing at the snow. "It tried to pull me out," she said. "It said my name." Wes didn't ask what it was. He just said, "We're too late." By morning, the temperature had risen sharply. That sounds good if you've never been here. But sudden warmth means melting, shifting ice, unstable ground. We decided to leave immediately. As we packed up, I noticed something wrong with Wes. His shadow was off. It lagged behind him, not much, just enough to be noticeable if you were looking. When he stopped, it swayed, like it needed a second to remember what shape it was supposed to be. I told myself I was imagining it. That was my second mistake. We took a different route back, skirting a riverbank. Halfway through the day, Wes stopped suddenly. "Don't move," he said. I froze. "There's one behind you," he whispered. I felt it then, cold that wasn't from the air. A pressure like someone standing too close, studying me. I didn't turn around. Wes spoke calmly. "It thinks you're alone." "What is it?" I asked. "A mistake," he said. "Something that learned how to look like us, but not how to leave." He told me, very quietly, that sometimes people in Alaska disappear without a trace. No tracks, no bodies. When that happens, it's not because they got lost. It's because something else found them first. They step out of themselves, Wes said, and whatever's waiting steps in. My legs shook. How we stop it? "We don't," he said. "We make sure it doesn't follow us home." Before I could ask what that meant, Wes turned around. He faced the thing behind me. I saw it in my peripheral vision, taller than a man, wrong at the edges like a reflection stretched too far. It wore the suggestion of a face, but no details, just hollows where eyes should be. Wes didn't run. He stepped forward. The thing mirrored him perfectly. They merged like overlapping shadows at sunset. Then Wes screamed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't long. It was the sound of someone realizing they had made the right choice too late. And then he was gone. No blood, no struggle. Just me, Marcy, and two shadows where there should have been three. Marcy grabbed my arm. "We have to go. Now." We didn't stop until we reached the helicopters. The troopers asked where Wes was. We said he slipped into the river. That was the third lie told in that place. They never found his body. Months later, back home, life tried to feel normal again. I went back to work. I slept indoors. I avoided mirrors at night. But sometimes when the light hits just right, my shadow does something strange. It straightens when I slump. It moves when I don't. I finally understood what Wes meant about not letting it follow us home. It didn't. It replaced me there instead. I'm still here. I'm talking. I'm breathing. I do all the things I'm supposed to. But every once in a while, I catch my reflection watching me instead of copying me. And I know the real me is still standing on that frozen riverbank in Alaska, screaming quietly as something else learned how to walk away. I should have known something was wrong the moment I boarded the Celestial Dawn. It was a massive cruise ship, its decks sparkling under the Florida sun, and the terminal was packed with passengers eager for a week of leisure. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the ship was watching me. Not in a literal sense, but in the way a predator studies prey, patient and deliberate. I told myself I was imagining things. The first day was deceptively normal. I explored the decks, ate too much at the buffet, and sipped cocktails while staring at the endless horizon. But every time I passed the lower hallways, I noticed shadows flickering in ways that didn't make sense. Crew members smiled at me, too wide, too precise, their eyes strangely still. That night, I woke to a faint, persistent tapping. It came from the hallway outside my cabin. When I peeked through the peephole, nothing was there. I opened the door, and the corridor stretched farther than I remembered. The walls seemed to ripple faintly like water. I stepped back, and the effect vanished. My cabin door had disappeared. By the second day, passengers started disappearing. A man didn't return for breakfast. A child vanished from the pool. The crew insisted they had wandered off or gone sightseeing. But no one looked for them, and the fear among the remaining passengers was palpable. The fog came that evening, rolling across the decks in thick, white waves. It swallowed the horizon and dulled the sunlight. The ship's horn blared, irregular and short, almost like a warning. Most passengers froze, staring blindly into the mist. I tried to retreat to my cabin, but the door was gone again, replaced by a blank wall. I wandered the ship in panic, trying to find someone who could explain what was happening. Doors led to rooms I had never seen. Staircases ended midair. Mirrors reflected strangers instead of me, some with hollow eyes, mouths open in silent screams. I realized with growing horror, the ship was alive. It was reshaping reality, feeding not just on bodies, but on fear itself. By the third night, I knew I had to escape. I found a lifeboat hanging from the davit and jumped in. The water was black, viscous, as if resisting my every stroke. Behind me, the Celestial Dawn loomed impossibly tall, its decks stretching into the fog. Shadows pressed against the railings, faceless and silent. Hours or maybe days passed, time meaningless. Eventually, land appeared, pale sand, stretching endlessly, with a dense forest at its edge. Relief washed over me. I stumbled onto the shore, exhausted. But then I saw them. The missing passengers, hundreds of them, wandering like ghosts. Pale, faceless, hollow-eyed. And at their center, a woman I had glimpsed in the fog stood, hair plastered to her face, eyes black. "You can't leave," she said, her voice filling my mind. "You belong here now." Panic surged, but the sand shifted beneath my feet, pulling me back. The horizon warped, the forest bending unnaturally. The ship had followed me. This wasn't land, it was part of its world. I was trapped. Despair set in. I sank to my knees, but then I noticed something. The faceless passengers weren't moving with panic. They were calm. Their fear had ended, and the ship treated them differently. It fed on terror, but not on clarity or acceptance. I stopped struggling. I studied the figures, the sand, the fog. I listened to the ship in a way I had never dared before. Slowly I stood. The sand solidified. The path through the dunes opened. The woman in the center regarded me, uncertain. "You understand," she said. "Few ever do." I realized the ship was a predator, yes, but also a test. It reshaped reality around those who succumbed to fear. By confronting it with clarity, I had found a way to survive. I walked toward the horizon, fully aware that I was inside its domain, yet free in a way no one else was. The faceless passengers followed, not as captives, but as witnesses. The ship's presence pulsed around me, immense, patient. It was vast, ancient, and intelligent, but not omnipotent. Then I made a choice no one else could. I would not return to the ocean. I would not flee. I would remain inside its world, fully conscious, fully aware, and learn its patterns, its rules. I became a student of the ship. I am now part of it, not consumed, not destroyed, but aware. I walk its corridors, invisible to fear, observing the lost, shaping the ship's reality not with terror, but with understanding. The celestial dawn drifts beyond maps, beyond radar, waiting for the next passengers. Most will succumb to fear. Some will vanish. A rare few, like me, confront it and survive. I guide them. I teach them. I am no longer a passenger. I am its sentinel. And in that truth, I am free. I thought I knew the mountains. I've hiked alone for years, sleeping in the wilderness under stars, following maps, reading the terrain. But nothing I'd ever done prepared me for what happened last fall in Shenandoah National Park. I arrived just after sunrise, parking at a small, mostly forgotten trailhead off Skyline Drive. The trail was narrow, winding through old oaks and maples, their leaves turning gold and red. The air smelled of wet earth and decaying leaves, the crisp scent of autumn. I loaded my pack, checked my gear, and started up the ridge. I was alone, and I liked it that way. The first few hours were uneventful, almost serene. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting shifting patterns on the forest floor. Birds called occasionally, and I breathed deep, feeling the familiar thrill of being somewhere almost no one went. Around noon, I reached a split in the trail. One path continued along the ridge, marked and familiar. The other was barely visible, descending steeply into a dense thicket that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. The trailhead sign warned, in small print, unmaintained path. Hike at your own risk. I'd hiked worse. I took the descent, telling myself it would give me a shortcut to a waterfall I'd read about in an old hiking guide. The trail deteriorated quickly. Roots and rocks jutted from the ground, and the forest grew darker, almost oppressive. The wind died. The usual sounds, birds, insects, rustling leaves, vanished entirely. It was the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums and makes you feel like your own heartbeat is too loud. Then I saw the footprints. They were human, but not human. Long, narrow, deep in the soft soil. Barefoot, leading toward the valley below, and none leading away. My stomach turned. I wanted to turn back, but the trail behind me had disappeared, swallowed by overgrown brush and fallen trees. I pressed on. Eventually, I stumbled into a clearing. In the center was a small pond, black as ink, perfectly still. I knelt to drink, and that's when I noticed the reflection. At first, it was me, but then, slowly, I realized it wasn't. My face stared back pale and gaunt, eyes hollow, lips curved into a grin I hadn't made. Behind it, Shadows shifted, shapes that moved without sound. I backed away. My heart pounded. The forest around me seemed to breathe, stretching and bending in ways it shouldn't. And then I heard it, a whisper, soft, almost hesitant, but unmistakably human. Turn back. I spun, but no one was there. The shadows between the trees remained motionless, yet I knew they were watching. I ran. The forest twisted around me. The trail I thought I was following doubled back on itself. Every time I turned, the pond appeared again, closer than before, black and still, the reflection smiling. Figures emerged from the edge of my vision, tall and thin, movements jerky, unnatural. Their skin was pale, reflective as if wet. Their eyes empty holes, staring. I stumbled into another clearing. This one had what looked like a ruined cabin, half sunk in a moss and ivy. I approached cautiously. The door hung crooked. Inside, dust and rot reeked in the dim light, and on the walls were hundreds of photographs. People alone in the forest, smiling, posing, but every pair of eyes had been scratched out. Some faces were warped, frozen in silent terror. I gagged. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over the threshold. That's when I heard a voice, low and hollow, like it was coming from inside my own head. You shouldn't have come here. I ran blindly, back into the forest. Every tree seemed to lean toward me. Every root tried to snag me. I fell, scraping my hands and knees. When I looked up, the pond was there again, reflecting the pale moonlight, though the sun hadn't set. At its edge stood the tallest figure, head tilted unnaturally, long fingers brushing the water. It didn't move toward me. It didn't need to. Its presence was enough. I wanted to scream, but my voice refused. My mind raced. Then I remembered something my grandfather once told me. Fear gives life to what hunts you. The more afraid you are, the faster it catches you. I forced myself to stop, to breathe, to face it. I see you, I said. I'm here, and I will not run. The figure paused. The others froze. The water stilled. For the first time, the air felt still, not oppressive. It tilted its head, as if studying me, curious, not hostile. I walked slowly, deliberately, through the clearing. Step by step, I made my way around the pond, toward the trees where the light of the main trail shimmered. The figures did not follow. They watched. The forest exhaled. When I finally emerged onto the maintained trail, the sun had dipped low behind the mountains. I didn't look back. I walked steadily to my car, exhausted, bloodied, and shaken. I drove out of the park without stopping, heart still hammering. Weeks later, I realized the truth. The forest didn't want to kill me. It had tested me. It had wanted to see if I would cower, if I would flee, if I would panic. And I hadn't. That gave me passage, a kind of unspoken truce. I never returned to Shenandoah. I don't hike alone anymore. But sometimes when I walk in other forests, in other parks, I see shadows at the edge of my vision, shapes in the periphery. I catch glimpses of faces and reflections that shouldn't be there. And I know the forest is alive, watching, waiting. I survived that test, but I carry it with me now. The forest never forgets. And if I ever stray off the path again, it will remember me, and it will come for me. Because some wildernesses aren't just wild. They are patient, they are old, they are aware, and they do not forgive. I've always loved mountains for the way they made you feel both alive and insignificant at the same time. I grew up in the Rockies, spent every summer hiking, climbing, exploring. I thought I knew what isolation felt like until last October when I went on a trip that changed my understanding of fear entirely. I went with two friends, Claire and Simon, into a remote section of the White Mountains in New Hampshire. Our plan was simple, a 3-day loop along a ridge that rarely saw hikers. I felt confident in my experience. I shouldn't have. The first day was perfect. Crisp air, golden leaves clinging to aspens, the smell of wet pine. We moved quickly, pausing only for photos, laughter, and occasional jokes about how alone we were. That night, we camped near a small creek. I stared at the stars and felt that rare, absolute calm that only a mountain night can bring. The trouble began the next morning. Fog rolled in from the valleys, thick, almost tangible, swallowing everything around us. The trail disappeared beneath moss, roots, and fallen leaves. My GPS faltered, blinking coordinates that didn't exist. The compass spun lazily. Every ridge, every boulder, every tree looked the same. By midday, unease had settled over us. Rocks stacked in strange, deliberate towers lined the trail. Fallen trees leaned in ways that blocked paths we thought were clear. The forest itself seemed alive, shifting subtly as if observing us. Simon laughed nervously, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the mountains were testing us. Night fell quickly. We set up camp on a narrow ridge. The fog pressed against us like a living thing. Silence wrapped around us. No wind, no water, no rustle of animals. Just the stillness and the sense of eyes watching. I lay awake, staring into the trees. Every shadow stretched unnaturally in the firelight. Around midnight, I saw it. A figure at the edge of the firelight, impossibly tall, limbs bending wrong. Its head tilted unnaturally, and though its face was hidden, I felt its gaze. I froze. Claire stirred but didn't wake. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the figure melted into the fog. Morning brought no relief. The fog remained thick, and the ridge we had camped on had vanished. Trees shifted, rocks realigned. Streams ran in directions that made no sense. My GPS was dead. Radio's useless. The mountains had rewritten themselves. On the third day, we stumbled across a cabin. Its walls were warped, roof sloping impossibly, windows narrow and crooked. We hesitated. I wanted to turn back, but exhaustion and cold pushed us inside. The air was metallic, heavy. The walls were carved with hundreds of names, layered over decades. Some were familiar, missing hikers from old reports. Then I saw my name carved freshly and deeply into the wood. My stomach churned. The cabin seemed alive. Shadows stretched and twisted along the walls. Claire stepped forward, and the floor beneath her rippled, bending like breathing wood. She screamed and vanished. Simon grabbed me, but the cabin had grown larger, corners folding into impossible darkness. I ran, out into the fog, calling for Simon, but he was gone. Every ridge, every trail, every tree had shifted into something unrecognizable. Hunger and exhaustion became secondary to the raw terror of being watched. Finally, I stumbled onto a small plateau above a lake. The fog lifted slightly. Across the ridge, the figure stood again, taller than I remembered, bending forward as though studying me. I froze. Then slowly, it raised a hand. The ground beneath me shifted, sliding me toward the water. I plunged in, the shock of freezing water jolting me awake, and I swam to shore. The mountains were normal again. Trails aligned with maps. Streams ran properly. I hiked back to civilization, exhausted, terrified, but alive. Authorities found nothing. No cabin, no warped trees, no missing friends. Weeks later, I received a photograph in the mail. No return address. It was taken from a ridge near our campsite, fog curling over the peaks. There, at the edge of the mist, were Claire and Simon, looking directly at the camera, calm and silent. Behind them, the tall figure, watching. That's when I realized the truth. The mountains hadn't taken them. They had collected them. I left the state, driving east for weeks. I don't go near mountains anymore. But sometimes I see the fog curling over peaks I've never climbed, and I feel that gaze again. Patient, waiting. And I know, eventually, the mountains will call me back. The difference this time is that when they do, I won't run. I'll go willingly. Because I know the mountains keep their memory and they never forget. I started taking night walks after my divorce. It wasn't dramatic, just two people quietly deciding they were done. The nights afterward felt too long and too silent, so I'd walk until my head cleared. This happened in late October in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place where nothing ever makes the news. I left my house a little after 1 a.m. The sky was low and clouded, no moonlight at all. Everything looked normal, at first. I walked my usual route toward the old drainage trail. About 10 minutes in, I noticed I hadn't passed a single moving car. The silence felt thick, pressing against my ears. I reached the intersection by the school and froze. The crosswalk signal was on, a bright white walking figure. It stayed that way. No countdown, no blinking, just the same static symbol. I stepped into the street anyway. Halfway across, the street light above me flickered, then went out. Not a pop, just gone. Then the next light went dark, and the next. Like something turning them off one by one, following me. I jogged to the sidewalk, heart hammering. I told myself it was a power fluctuation, nothing more. But my phone buzzed in my pocket. No service. That made no sense. I was less than a mile from my house. I turned back. The street behind me was longer than it should have been. The school sat far in the distance, its walls stretched and warped. I blinked hard and looked again. Normal. I laughed under my breath and kept walking toward the drainage trail. The entrance was a narrow break in the trees. The moment I stepped onto the dirt path, the air changed. It felt colder, heavier. Then I heard footsteps, not behind me, beside me, perfectly matching my pace. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I turned my head slowly. There was no one there. Get it together, I whispered. I walked faster. The footsteps resumed, still beside me, still invisible. I broke into a jog. Gravel crunched under my shoes. The sound of my right matched exactly. Same rhythm, same pressure. I veered off the path suddenly and spun around. Nothing. But the sound continued for one more step after I stopped, as if whoever or whatever had taken a moment to realize I'd changed direction. Panic crept up my spine like ice water. The trees were closer together now, branches leaning inward, blocking out the sky. I turned and ran. The trail didn't end where it should have. Instead of houses, it led to a stretch of woods I didn't recognize. No streetlights, just trees and darkness. That's when I saw the man standing ahead. He was tall, thin, wearing a reflective running jacket just like mine. "Hey," he said, "you shouldn't be here." I exhaled. I think I got turned around. He studied my face. "You didn't. You drifted." "Drifted where?" I asked. "Out," he said. "It happens at night, when people walk too far away from their lives." The air began to vibrate. I looked at his face. My throat went dry. It was mine. Same scar. Same tired eyes. Same crooked nose. "No, that's not possible." I staggered back. "You just didn't stop when you should have," he said gently. "I want to go back," I pleaded. He smiled sadly. I said the same thing. The woods began to hum, a low, deep sound like distant machinery. "What happens now?" I whispered. "You keep walking," he said, "and someday, someone else will hear you beside them and wonder why their steps don't echo." The humming grew louder. The trees leaned in until they were all I could see. I screamed and ran, not caring about the direction, just trying to outrun that familiar face. I don't remember falling, but I woke up on my living room floor as the sun came up. My shoes were caked in mud. My legs ached like I'd run a marathon. My phone had service. The power was on. Everything was normal. I told myself it was stress, a vivid hallucination brought on by the divorce. I almost believed it. Until I went out for a walk the next night. I made it halfway down the block when I heard it. Footsteps beside me, matching my pace perfectly. I didn't stop this time. I looked straight ahead. And there, just at the edge of the shadows where the streetlight couldn't reach, I heard a whisper. It was my voice, but it sounded older, tired. It said, "You shouldn't be here." I walked back home and locked the door. I haven't gone out after midnight since. Because I know now that some paths don't lead back home. They just lead to more of yourself.
Drop a like if you made it to the end.